Imagine a city on the edge of a storm, Jerusalem bustling and alive during the Passover festival. The air is heavy with expectation, and whispers of a mysterious preacher from Galilee spread like wildfire through the crowded streets. This is a city brimming with religious fervor and political tension, a place where hope and hatred collide. In the heart of this ancient city, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, feels the weight of power pressing down on him. Pilate is a man accustomed to ruling with iron certainty, yet now he is troubled, haunted by a presence that defies his understanding. The name on everyone's lips is Jesus of Nazareth, a man who speaks of a kingdom not of this world, who performs miracles that defy logic, and who challenges the very heart of Roman authority and Jewish tradition. But this is not just the story of Jesus. It is also the story of Pilate, a man caught between the demands of an empire and the stirrings of his own conscience. It is a story of political pressure, divine mystery, and a decision that would change the course of history. Tonight, we explore a tale of power and faith, betrayal and redemption. Join us as we uncover the letter that Pilate wrote to Emperor Tiberius, a letter that not only recounts the astonishing rise of Jesus, but also reveals the turmoil that shook the soul of the man who condemned him. This is the story of a Roman's encounter with a carpenter from Nazareth. It is the story of a governor who tried to wash his hands of a man he could not forget, a man whose words still echo across time. It is the story of Jesus Christ, the man who stood silently before power and transformed the world forever. To the most honored Caesar Tiberius, Pilate began, his quill scratching lightly against the parchment. The ink spread slowly, each word feeling heavier than the last. In these days, there has arisen in our land a man of unparalleled virtue. His name is Jesus Christ, and he lives among us, though many claim that he is more than just a man. They call him the Son of God, a title that he does not deny. Pilate paused, lifting his quill for a moment as he recalled his first sight of Jesus in the crowded streets of Jerusalem. It had been a chaotic day in the temple courts, a day when traders, money changers, and pilgrims jostled for space, and the air was thick with the noise of haggling voices and bleating livestock. Pilate had stood on the edges, watching as Jesus appeared suddenly among them, with an authority that silenced the chaos around him. He spoke with clarity, each word cutting through the noise like a blade. The crowds had gathered, pressing closer, and, even from a distance, Pilate had sensed that something extraordinary was happening. There was an undeniable magnetism in Jesus' presence, a power that could not be explained, a confidence that seemed unshakable. Pilate, accustomed to ruling with fear and force, had never witnessed anything like it. His appearance is unlike that of any other, Pilate continued, choosing his words with care. He is tall, well-proportioned, with an air of dignity that both captivates and intimidates. His face is fair and noble, with a complexion untouched by blemish or flaw. There is a stillness in his demeanor, a peacefulness that makes one wonder if he is a man at all. Pilate's hand trembled slightly as he described Jesus' features. He could still see those eyes, sharp and searching, as if they could look straight into his soul. It had been during their first direct encounter that Pilate truly felt the weight of Jesus' presence, an encounter that he would never forget. His hair, Pilate wrote, is a rich chestnut, smooth around his ears, but it lightens and waves as it falls to his shoulders. His eyes are a clear gray, sharp and penetrating, filled with a wisdom that is not of this world. His beard, like his hair, is full yet neatly trimmed, and his voice carries authority, yet it is gentle, compelling even the hardest of hearts to listen. He put down the quill and closed his eyes, hearing that voice once again in his mind, a voice that seemed to speak not just to the ears, but to the very soul. It was a voice that stirred something deep within him, something he had long thought dormant, a yearning for truth that he had buried under years of rule and politics. Pilate's thoughts drifted to the growing fame of Jesus in Judea, a fame that had grown from whispers into a tidal wave of reports, miracles, and controversy. He dipped his quill back into the ink and continued to write. "This man from Galilee has stirred the hearts of the people in a way I have never witnessed," he wrote. They speak of his miracles. The blind are given sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, and even the dead are said to rise at his command. He preaches with a boldness that defies the Pharisees and Sadducees, challenging their authority and revealing their hypocrisy. Pilate thought of the reports that had flooded his court from every corner of Judea. Stories of Jesus turning water into wine at a wedding, calming storms with a word, and healing those who had been deemed incurable. He remembered the story of Lazarus, the dead man who had walked out of his tomb, the witnesses who had sworn they had seen it with their own eyes. It was these accounts, filled with awe and terror, that troubled Pilate the most. "He is loved by the poor," Pilate continued, his handwriting growing more intense. "For he speaks of a kingdom that belongs to them, a kingdom not of this world." He calls for repentance, mercy, and love, challenging the very heart of our Roman authority and the Jewish traditions. He had seen the faces of those who followed Jesus, faces filled with a desperate kind of hope. There were fishermen, farmers, beggars, and outcasts, the kind of people who had little stake in the world of power and prestige. Jesus' words had ignited something in them that Pilate could not fully understand, a hope that seemed to transcend even death itself. One morning, just as the first light of dawn touched the city walls, the Jewish leaders brought Jesus to Pilate's palace. They had captured him in the dead of night, away from the crowds, and now they stood outside the praetorium, demanding judgment. Pilate had not slept well that night, plagued by an uneasy feeling he could not shake. He reluctantly ordered Jesus to be brought inside. The doors to the governor's hall swung open, and Jesus was led in, his hands bound with rough cords. Pilate saw him clearly for the first time, and it struck him that Jesus looked more like a king in chains than a prisoner. There was no panic in his eyes, no pleading, only a calmness that seemed to radiate through the room. Pilate scrutinized him, searching for signs of fear or rebellion, but found none. He asked his guards to remove Jesus' bindings, feeling an odd impulse to show this man, if not respect, then at least a semblance of dignity. They stood alone in the hall, facing each other, as if the rest of the world had fallen away. "I questioned him about the charges they brought against him," Pilate wrote, his hand steady. "The accusations were many: blasphemy, sedition, claims of kingship. Yet, when I looked into his eyes, I saw no trace of a revolutionary, no hint of deceit or ambition." He remembered how he had sat forward, his voice skeptical, as he asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus' answer had been as unyielding as his gaze. "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have fought to prevent my arrest. But as it is, my kingdom is from another place." Pilate felt a chill run down his spine, a sensation he had never felt before. He pressed further, needing to understand who stood before him. "Are you the Son of God?" he asked, the words almost hesitant. "You have said so," Jesus replied calmly. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." It was as if the air had thickened, and for a moment, Pilate felt the weight of the room pressing down on him. There was a gravity in those words that defied explanation, a presence that made him feel small and exposed. He had seen many men lie to save their lives, but there was no deceit in Jesus' eyes, only a sorrowful acceptance, as if he already knew what was to come. Pilate's pen moved slower now as he relived the days of mounting pressure. The Jewish leaders had become relentless, threatening rebellion if Jesus was not condemned. Pilate knew that his position as governor was on a knife's edge. A rebellion would not only cost him his authority, but could also trigger a violent crackdown from Rome, a bloodbath that would stain his career and reputation. "I found no fault in him," Pilate wrote, his frustration evident in each stroke of the quill. But the crowd was relentless. They called for his crucifixion, and the chief priests stirred them into a frenzy. "For the sake of peace, for the stability of the city, I ordered his death, though my heart was filled with dread as I did so." Pilate could still see the faces of the crowd, twisted with rage, their shouts echoing in his ears. He had tried to offer a compromise, suggesting the release of a prisoner as a gesture of goodwill, but the mob had chosen Barabbas, a known criminal, over the innocent man who stood before him. Pilate's own authority had been undermined, his hands tied by the fury of the people he was meant to rule. He remembered the moment when he had washed his hands in the basin of water, a symbolic gesture of his innocence. The words still echoed in his mind. "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." But even as he spoke them, he knew that no water could wash away the weight that settled upon his soul. The crucifixion was a spectacle meant to be a warning to any who might challenge Rome's authority. But this one felt different, even as Jesus was led to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Pilate watched from a distance, unable to tear his eyes away from the figure of Jesus carrying his cross, his steps slow but resolute. He had ordered countless executions, but never before had he felt this strange, aching sense of sorrow, a sorrow that had no place in the heart of a Roman governor. As Jesus hung upon the cross, a sense of foreboding settled over the city. It was as if all of creation itself held its breath. Pilate wrote with a shaking hand, the memory still vivid. At midday, darkness covered the land. The sun vanished, and the sky grew black as night. The very earth trembled, and I felt the ground shake beneath my feet. The temple curtain tore from top to bottom, as if unseen hands had ripped it apart. Pilate had stood in stunned silence, the tremors of the earth matching the turmoil in his heart. He had heard the cries of those who mourned Jesus, the weeping of women who had followed him, and the scornful laughter of the priests. Yet, when Jesus cried out, "It is finished," a strange silence had fallen over the land, a silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity. The days that followed were filled with whispers and rumors. Pilate's wife, Claudia, had been deeply shaken. She spoke of a dream she had had the night before the trial, a warning that still haunted him. "Have nothing to do with that righteous man," she had said, her eyes filled with fear. Her words lingered in Pilate's mind, amplifying the doubts that gnawed at him. Then came the reports, impossible, unthinkable reports. The tomb where Jesus' body had been laid was found empty, the massive stone rolled away, the guards bewildered and trembling. Pilate had dismissed the rumors as the hysterical fantasies of a grieving people, but the stories only grew, spreading throughout the city and beyond. The tomb was sealed and guarded, yet the stone was found rolled away. Pilate wrote to Caesar, "My own soldiers could offer no explanation, and I fear that we have witnessed something beyond our understanding." His followers are now bolder than ever, proclaiming that he is alive, that he is the Son of God. Pilate's unease turned to a cold, gnawing fear as the atmosphere in Jerusalem shifted. Jesus' followers, once scattered and terrified, now spoke with a boldness that seemed to defy logic. It was as if the man he had condemned had risen from the dead to ignite a fire that could not be extinguished. In the final lines of his letter, Pilate poured out his inner turmoil, a confession he dared to share only with the emperor. "I do not know if I have condemned a blasphemer or a king," Pilate wrote, his words thick with sorrow. "But I cannot forget the look in his eyes, the way he bore the suffering without complaint, the words he spoke that still echo in my mind. The gods have turned their faces from us, and I fear that his death may mark a turning point in our history, a turning point that will change the world forever." Pilate sealed the letter with his ring and handed it to a trusted courier, his heart heavy. As the messenger left, Pilate knew that he had not just sent a report to Rome, he had set something in motion, something that could not be undone. Months turned into years, and the memory of Jesus lingered in Pilate's mind like a shadow that refused to fade. He continued to rule Judea, but his confidence had been shattered. He found himself gazing at the hills outside the city, wondering if the man he had condemned truly was who he claimed to be. In the quiet of his chamber, Pilate would hear the sounds of hammering nails, the final cry of Jesus on the cross, a cry that had lodged itself deep in his soul, after being removed from his post and exiled from the centers of power. Pilate's life became a tale of regrets and restless nights. He would speak of Jesus to those who would listen, retelling the story of the man he had once sentenced to die. Some said that Pilate even came to believe in the man he had condemned, seeing in him a hope for a different kind of kingdom, a kingdom not built on violence and conquest, but on love, justice, and truth. The letter he had written to Caesar, though hidden and nearly forgotten, became a legend among the early Christians, a testimony to the power of Jesus' life and death, even in the eyes of those who had sought to destroy him. It was said that Pilate never forgot the face of the man who had stood silently before him, nor the words that had upended his world. And as the years passed, the story of Jesus Christ, the man who spoke of a kingdom not of this world, would spread far beyond the reach of the Roman Empire, transforming lives, shaking empires, and kindling a hope that refused to be extinguished. Even as Rome's glory faded, the memory of Jesus lived on, a light that burned in the hearts of those who believed, a light that Pilate, despite all his doubts, had glimpsed and could never fully forget. And so, the story ends not with the fall of a Roman governor, nor with the collapse of an ancient empire, but with the echo of a single life that transformed the world. The man who stood before Pilate, who spoke of a kingdom not of this earth, was condemned and crucified, yet his impact could not be silenced by death or sealed behind a stone. Pontius Pilate tried to wash his hands of the decision he made, but history remembers him as the man who stood at the crossroads of truth and power. His letter, written in uncertainty and doubt, became a testimony to the one he could never forget, a carpenter from Nazareth who spoke with a wisdom that transcended empires. The message of Jesus outlived the grandeur of Rome, and his story continues to inspire hearts, challenge minds, and spark hope in even the darkest places. It is a story of sacrifice, of redemption, and of a love that conquered the grave, a story that has carried through centuries and continues to speak to us today. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past, where faith and power collided, and the words of a condemned man became the seeds of a movement that would reach every corner of the world. If you found the story as compelling as we did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a future episode. We have many more stories to tell, stories of faith, courage, and history that have shaped the world we live in today. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the stories that continue to inspire, challenge, and uplift us. Until next time, may you carry the light of truth in your hearts, just as Jesus' story has carried through the ages. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.